Here we are in the midst of the worst economic downturn perhaps since the Great Depression. Tens of millions of people are worried to death about how they're going to feed their families, pay their rent, prevent a foreclosure. And these guys are just staying up nights, worrying about low-income workers getting a few bucks more. And what I have said is if they are prepared to drop their hold, which I believe they are, by the way, I am certainly not going to persist in what I want. But I just wanted to make it clear that I will not sit back, nor should anybody sit back and allow these guys to attack the needs of low-income workers, especially at a time when in this particular bill, there are $500 billion available to the president for all kinds of corporate welfare and chicanery. They don't object to that. They worry about the working people getting a few bucks more.
That was, of course, Senator Bernie Sanders explaining why he threatened to stall the vote on the $2 trillion coronavirus stimulus bill, a bill, as the senator pointed out, that has a whole lot of corporate appeasement tacked onto it.
Huffpost senior writer Zach Carter, he took a deep dive into what was outlined in that legislation. His conclusion is that it can only be described as an outrage. And Zach joins us now via Skype to explain more. He's also the author of The Price of Peace, Money, Democracy, and the Life of John Maynard Keynes. So aptly written, I guess, at this time, Zach. Zach, tell us a little bit about the bill in particular. What was most objectionable in your view?
The hardest thing for me to swallow was a fund created, controlled by Steve Mnuchin with cursory sort of strings attached that he can essentially wave when he needs to. The fund is about $500 billion, but it can be leveraged 10 to 1 at the Federal Reserve. So we're looking at trillions of dollars in money that's going to flow to corporate shareholders. There is no real congressional effort to rein in or guide the way that this money is used. It's essentially taking the model of the 2008 bank bailouts and putting it on steroids. I think there were a lot of problems with the 2008 bank bailouts, and that should not be the way that Congress approaches this crisis. There will be a lot of money that needs to be spent, as we see from the unemployment claims that are up at record levels this morning. But Congress should do some governing. They shouldn't just hand over the keys of the country to Steve Mnuchin and Donald Trump.
Yeah, well, and Democrats blocked this bill twice, right, over this bailout money and lack of oversight. And then at the end of the day, after blocking it twice, all they got was some basically cursory oversight, some minimal strings that, as you point out, Mnuchin can wave away at any time. I mean, what happened here? Why didn't they fight for more? Was there more that they could have gotten?
Well, Bernie Sanders thinks that the deal on unemployment insurance is good. It expands unemployment benefits by about $600 a month. And there's a $1,200 check that will go out to households making less than six figures. There's a little bit of sort of strange thinking going on here. The Democrats were very careful and insisted that they wanted this $1,200 check to be targeted so that the rich wouldn't benefit too much from the legislation. Meanwhile, there's this multi-trillion-dollar fund that is going to shareholders of corporations who are wealthy people. Only about 20% of the country owns $25,000 in stock or more, even indirectly through their retirement plans. So the bill is designed first and foremost to save the super rich. The thought, I think, for a lot of Democrats was, well, we'll put a little bit of money in for the poor. They need it really badly right now. It's true. And that will make that's a fair compromise. I think after years of governing this way, we can see what the long-term consequences of this kind of arrangement will be. They will lead to more corporate concentration, bigger corporations with more control over our politics. And I don't think the Democratic Party should be governing that way.
And so it's interesting, Zach, that ultimately Bernie did vote for the bill. A lot of the populists on the right who had problems, they also voted for the bill. Elizabeth Warren voted for the bill. What is it that leadership did that basically held the gun to both of these sides who had objections to the bill and said, you have to vote for it, and ultimately succeeded? Not usually people who go along to get along.
Well, I don't have access to any private conversations between Chuck Schumer and Elizabeth Warren. But I think ultimately there wasn't a whole lot of interest in holding up money going out the door in a crisis. There is a very serious economic crisis that's happening right now. It's going to be something unprecedented in our lifetimes. And I think Democrats just got cold feet. I think progressive leaders got cold feet and didn't want to have to take responsibility for being somebody who put roadblocks in the way of that money going out the door. I think that's that's just kind of a failure of will. I don't think Chuck Schumer threatened to primary Bernie Sanders or anything like that. It's just sort of the way that progressive leaders responded in this particular crisis.
Well, and I mean, the irony that you point out of Democrats were so adamant, Nancy Pelosi and others, about this has to be targeted, has to be means tested, which, while on the other hand, allowing these trillions of dollars to go to the richest among us is rich. And also, by the way, by means testing these payments, it means you're not getting money into people's hands right away because people have to file paperwork. They have to prove their poverty, that they fall into the appropriate income level to the federal government, which may not even be, an accurate way of doing things when you consider the fact of what you earned back in 2018 has nothing to do with what you're earning now or whether or not you were just laid off. So, in fact, by focusing and requiring these payments to be means testing, they are massively delaying these payments going out to people who need them right away.
And look, there were Republicans on the right who were arguing for more generous proposals than these $1,200 payments. Mitt Romney had suggested a $1,000 check, but he didn't want to means test it for anybody. Josh Hawley had proposed a means tested program, but it was more generous than what the final bill looked like. They rolled over too, but it shows you that within even the Republican Party, there was discussion of something of ideas that were a little bit more, let's say, progressive than what we ended up with here. I would be very surprised if Josh Hawley or Mitt Romney, wanted to vote against this enormous corporate bailout fund, and of course, ultimately they didn't. But it's. They were putting together this legislative package. They had to rewrite the bill 4 or 5 times before they could vote on it. I think it's pretty clear this is not the best of all possible worlds, the greatest possible deal that could have been leveraged by Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer in this moment.
Mm-hmm. Zach, ultimately, why does this bill fall short? You have background in economics and Keynes in particular. This, if there was ever a time for Keynesian, it was right now. So why does it fall short? What's the issue?
We need to spend money. We need to spend a lot of money, and we need to not really worry about the deficit right now. But the way you spend the money matters. If you spend the money on rich people, you will exacerbate inequality and ultimately make the prospects for recovery more sluggish and more difficult to achieve. This bill does not focus on getting money to people who need it the most. It focuses on getting people who already have the most money. And that is not the best way to organize a recovery. And most of it's unnecessary. These corporations are getting hundreds of billions of dollars from the Federal Reserve already. They have time. They will need money, but there is time to craft a corporate bailout package that doesn't just subsidize and reward bad behavior. Congress chose not to take that path.
And Zach, it still has to pass the House. AOC has been making some noises that she may force people to come back to Washington, not have it passed by unanimous consent, have everybody come back and record a vote on this bill. Do you think that's the right move? And do you think there's a chance that this thing could still be derailed at this point?
Oh, there's always a chance. I mean, these things, the politics of them are so volatile. I mean, we'll find out. I do think that this bill should be held up and stopped, and I think Congress should come back and try this again. The Senate wants to take a month off right now during what looks like it's going to be the worst economic and public health crisis of our lifetimes. That's not responsible governing. I don't think it's really crazy to say you guys can't go on vacation right now. So if AOC were to try and hold things up, I think that would be a responsible act. But it would not be popular in Washington and within the Democratic Party. She'd take a lot of heat for that. So it's a tough thing to do. Violations of Capitol Hill etiquette are taken very seriously by members of Congress, even on the left, and people would remember that for a long time. So I think she's in a difficult spot, but I do think that would be the right thing to do.
Certainly a difficult spot.
Well said.
All right, Zach. Thank you.
Thanks,
Appreciate
Zach.
you joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Mm-hmm. Next up, journalist and author Aaron Glantz. He talks about what happens when everybody's rent is due. That's when Rising continues.